Hey everyone! So I have something slightly different going on today, because I've been contacted by a couple of guys from a defense company here in the country, and they wanted to know if they could borrow my Humvee for a couple of photo shoots for some promotional stuff for their products. And I said, sure, why not? But there is a couple of things that I would like to do to this before then, so I figured I'd just take you guys along for that. And also, I'm going to be using this video as an opportunity to test out some new microphone setups. Just because in the last couple of videos, the audio quality has been really poor. Some of you guys have also been commenting about that, and I've also been getting myself annoyed going through the edit of all that stuff. But the thing is, I'm doing more talking in the videos now, and this should be much more suited for that, because the microphone I was using before is not really ideal for that kind of stuff. So hopefully this should also get rid of some of all that background noise and also that echo that there is inside my workshop. So it's going to be interesting to see how this works out. So anyway, let's talk about what we're doing to this. So the main thing here is those wheels, or at least the color of them, because 3 out of 4 wheels on this are in this desert sand color. And it doesn't really go very well with the rest of the truck. When they're in this camo color, they are just supposed to be black. And this is also something that some of you guys have been commenting on now and then. But I did have intentions of turning these black. I haven't really gotten around to it yet, but I figured this would be a good opportunity to finally do that. Now, it is actually pretty normal to see this kind of mismatching colors on these military trucks, because they do swap parts around between the trucks. And for something like this that has just been going into storage, for instance, they're not really going to be concerned with color matching things. But one thing about that desert color is that for a lot of these vehicles that start out as either green or at least green camoed, this desert color is just very lightly sprayed on, so it doesn't actually stick very well. And you can also see right here on the rear wheel, it's already peeling pretty badly. Sometimes they do this on purpose so that when they're done in the desert and they have to turn these back to green, they can just pressure wash all that desert color off so they don't actually have to paint the trucks again. Now, I don't actually think that my tiny little pressure washer is going to do a whole lot to this, but I am going to have to wash the whole thing anyway, so I may as well try. But I do think I'm going to end up having to paint those black. So I also just wanted to know how this microphone handles me talking inside these loud vehicles, because that's something they typically struggle with as well. So if you're seeing this, that means it works well enough. Yeah, so they are kind of lining up to get washed back here. But I figured I may as well do them all at once. So I'm just going to do those 2 real quick, and then we'll get back to the Humvee. Okay, so that's those 2 done. So let's go ahead and get back to this. And let's start by trying to see if it'll actually take some of that paint off. I doubt it, but let's try. It's actually getting some of it. So it is actually taking some of it off, but it's not able to take all of it. I think it's really only getting the stuff that's already flaking a bit and already falling off anyway. So yeah, I think I'm just going to wash the rest of the truck and then we'll take these off, grind them a bit and just paint them real quick. Because I can actually see in some places around the bolts, I'm actually getting down to bare metal, so I'm gonna want some paint on that anyway. Alright, so that's good enough for me. But while I was finishing this up, it slowly started to snow. And it looks like it's only gonna get worse. It's supposed to be spring. This is not really going my way. And I don't have room in my workshop, so I'm just gonna move this over here where I'm at least gonna be under a roof. And then we'll go ahead and get those wheels off. So I'm not really filming a whole lot of this because it's just me taking wheels off, and you see that often enough. But while I was down there, I noticed something I'd actually forgotten about. So this is the only wheel that's black on the outside, but it's also the only one that is sand colored on the inside. So I guess I'm just gonna be painting all four. So of course, now that I actually took my time and moved it, that snowstorm just went over there instead. So I'm gonna use the opportunity now to just get these washed on the inside because there's still quite a bit of mud in here. Alright, so I'm not really gonna be making a big deal out of this because, well, this is one of the great joys of working on these military trucks, is that they're not really supposed to be pretty. So if you make something like this really nice and you don't do the rest of the truck, it's just gonna end up looking weird. So I'm just gonna hit these with the wire brush just to get the loose stuff off and rough them up a bit. Then I'm gonna go and cover off all these things that I don't want to paint, like all those bolts and the valves and such, and the tires, of course. And then I'm just gonna hit them with a few coats of primer and a few coats of matte black paint, and that'll be it. Alright, so this should be plenty good for some fresh paint to be able to stick to those. Now I just have to go in and cover up all the things that I don't want to paint, like all the bolts, because you don't really want to fill these threads with paint. But really, I'd already started crying just at the thought of having to manually tape every single one of those. But then I remembered I have a 3D printer and figured maybe I could do something clever with that. So I just quickly modeled out and printed a little cover like this to go on there like that. Haha! That is just going to make it so much better, or at least so much easier to do this, and save me a ton of time. And I actually know that something like this already exists, and also on these wheels you could tell, at least before I started grinding them, that they had a little unpainted edge right around the bolts. So that suggests that something like this was also used when they were initially painted in that sand color. But this one was just a test piece to see if it'll actually work. So now I'm going to set the printer up to make a bunch more of those. And in the meantime, I'm going to tape around the edge just so I don't paint all over my tires as well. It's always a bit annoying to mask off wheels like this. So at this point, I was going to use some masking paper to cover up the rest of the sidewalls because I know that spray paint dust gets everywhere. But because of the shape, I would have to cut so many pieces to cover this. And I actually think it would be faster just to use the tape because it would really only take like 2 or 3 more lines to cover the whole thing. So sure, I'm going to use a little more tape, but you know, I would have to pay for the masking paper anyway, so that doesn't really make a difference. Well, now they're just looking like big glazed donuts. But actually that was much faster, and it was only just 1 roll of tape for the whole thing, so it wasn't even that bad. Oh yeah. That's definitely the way to do this. Okay, so I think we're about ready to get some paint on these. So for the primer, I'm just going to use some regular steel primer, just because I did get these down to bare metal in several spots, so that's going to help protect them from rust and also make the paint stick a little bit better. And the paint itself, it was actually a little bit difficult to find something that would work, because I of course just want these to be matte black. They're not supposed to have any shine to them, so I couldn't really use anything that needed a clear coat on top of it. But I did manage to find something that is specifically for wheels, so that just means it's a little more durable and a little more chip resistant without needing the clear coat. But most of these are in glossy colors, but this one is actually matte black, so I'm going to try this out. Yeah, maybe I should have waited till it was actually dry, but I just really wanted to see if this worked. Looks like it worked just fine. There's a tiny bit of overspray on some of them, right around the edges, but I could definitely live with that. So while these dry, I guess we can just talk a little bit about the wheels of a Humvee, because to some of you this might look like a half job, and it is. So you may be wondering why I'm doing it like this, why I didn't just take the tires off and actually paint the wheels proper. And furthermore, I have a complete set of unused black Humvee wheels right here, so why didn't I just take the tires off and put them on those? So the main thing is, I needed this job to be relatively fast. Like I said, the finish is not super important, and also, I do need the truck in a couple of days, so I can't spend a whole week doing this. And actually taking the tires off the wheels on a Humvee is quite, let's call it, labor intensive. Let me explain. So the Humvees have split wheels, or split rims, or two-piece wheels, or whatever you may want to call them. And essentially that means that when you have to get the tire on and off, instead of just forcing it over the edge like you would on a normal steel wheel, these actually just come apart. Now you would think that this actually makes it a little bit easier, and in some ways it does, but you do have to do up a lot of bolts. Now these are the typical 12 bolt wheels. The very early ones only had 8, and I guess they pretty quickly figured out that wasn't really enough. But on the later, heavier variants, they actually have 24 bolts on each wheels. So that is a lot of bulk you're going to have to undo and redo just to get the tires on and off. And another thing is that when you have a split rim of some type, you're also typically going to have a tube inside the tire, because normally these are not going to be airtight, but these ones have to be because there's actually not room for a tube in these. So that means you're also going to have to fit a big rubber gasket around here when you go to reassemble these. And I don't actually have those for these wheels. I also don't have valve stems and all that stuff, so I couldn't really have used these anyway. Now the reason you can't have a tube in these is because you have a run flat in here. And that's essentially another wheel inside the wheel. It's a big solid rubber ring that sits all around the rim. Now, I don't actually have one of those, so I can't show you, but maybe I can find a picture of it and put it right here. So that insert does exactly what the name suggests. It's a run flat, so it allows you to run on flat tires. If you're in an environment where you get a lot of punctures, you can still drive away safely. And it actually sits very snugly around the rim, but also it sits up against the inner edge of the tire on both sides. So that when you clamp this wheel down, you actually pinch the tire in place. So it also doubles up as a double bead lock. Now typically in off-road we use bead locks so we can run really low tire pressure without the wheel falling off. And this is kind of the same, you just typically end up running no tire pressure, but you still don't want the wheel to fall off because it can crumple up and it can wrap around the axle and do all sorts of weird things. So that big rubber run flat in there, it's really just to ensure that you can drive away safely even if you've had a bunch of holes in your wheels. But it's also the reason that these wheels are really heavy. A complete wheel like this, it weighs almost 100 kilos. But all of this really means that it's a fairly big job to get the tires off and back on again, because you have to get all that stuff in place every time and replace gaskets and all that stuff. And I just didn't really want to mess with all that this time around. They should be dry enough now, so let's check them out. See how this turned out. All right, that's all looking pretty good. Now I just need to paint the inside of that one because that's one that was sand colored on the back. So I'm just gonna quickly do that so we can mount these back on the truck. I already hit this one with the wire brush when I did all the others, so I just gotta tape it up and then we'll just spray it over real quick. Be done with this. This is always much easier to do on a hard floor. also just realized that with this microphone setup, I can do some slightly different camera angles because now I don't actually have to be right next to the camera to talk to it. So I should even be able to be at a pretty good distance without actually having to yell out to the camera. Alright, so I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of wheeling for this video because, well, obviously the whole point of this was to make this thing clean and presentable and looking somewhat nice for an upcoming photo shoot. But I am pretty happy with how the wheels turned out. This is looking much better on this green camo color scheme. So now I just have to dust off the interior a little bit, and then that's going to be as good as it gets this time around. But it's also been pretty cool to play around with this new microphone setup. I've already done a lot of the editing on this one, so I already know it's making a pretty big difference. And actually there's a lot of wind right now. I can see there's some more storms coming in, so it's going to be interesting to hear how it handles that. But anyway, that's going to be it for this one, so thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next one.